It might seem like a contradiction. On the one hand, they block homes, then they subsidize homes. They block resources, then subsidize resources. They want to be in the middle of everything.
First, they wanted half your paycheck and then your savings and now your future. And they're trying to manipulate and guilt trip you into giving that over to them. You know, I have come up with a pretty shocking discovery when it comes to this whole Canada doesn't like the USA because of Trump tariffs thing. Yeah, it's starting to look more and more like tariffs have absolutely nothing to do with any of this. And we will be diving into that. I'm Jasmine Lane. Subscribe, like, follow, and comment your thoughts down below. And as always, share this video so that we can help wake up even more Canadians.
It's our country. It's your future. And we are going to give it back to you. For decades, Canada's economy became more closely linked to the United States. The U.S. is the world's largest economy, so on the one hand, that created tons of new business and jobs for us. But it also meant that when things change suddenly for the worse down there, it causes big problems up here, and it's hard to control what happens next. As Prime Minister, my number one focus is to put Canadians back in control by building here at home and building new partnerships abroad, so that we're not reliant on the United States. To do that, we will have to make some difficult choices, responsible choices. Federal government spending has grown massively over the last few years. That's not sustainable. We will cut wasteful government spending. We'll make massive investments in the things that grow our economy. Homes, new ports, electricity grids, the major infrastructure that will unlock the full potential of Canada. We've built big before.
Let's break this down bit by bit and fact check it a little bit. He says in the opening statement, what a weird opening statement for somebody claiming to empower you, where he says more or less that we lost our country and now the government needs to give it back, meaning it's theirs to withhold until further notice, because if you're giving something back, you admit that you took something away from people. Then he goes on about, for decades, Canada, we relied so closely to the United States, which was really good for us. Yep, our prosperity since World War II was largely due to the United States access. So this is just some weird warm-up spin before arguing that we need to abandon it. Again, that makes absolutely no sense. And then talking about, this is a really big one. He says, but it also meant when things change suddenly for the worse down there, it causes big problems up here. That framing is rather misleading because most Canadian recessions were global. They were not United States caused. And if the US tanks, the entire world tanks. So that's not a Canada problem. And avoiding anything with the United States isn't going to prevent that from happening at all. And just a friendly reminder that having a main trading partner is not uncommon or weird at all across the globe. Almost every country has one. Yes, Canada is very reliant on the United States, but why are we? We are very reliant on the United States thanks to the green agenda, which is where they have very deliberately hindered our growth and opportunity, said no to other nations when we could have said yes, and it actually wouldn't have increased emissions. It wouldn't have harmed the environment. It would have actually just helped us a lot in not only having a very strong economy, being a very reliable and respectable trading partner, but also in not being as dependent on the United States. It's like everything he is saying here is an admission that their government under the Liberals for the last 10 plus years has caused every single problem that we have right now. It's just so crazy to me. And for him to say, oh, my number one focus is to put Canadians back in control by reducing our reliance on the United States and increasing reliance on who?
It seems like everywhere Mark Carney goes with these grand meetings and photo ops, we end up with more tariffs. His failures abroad are costing us at home.
He met with the Chinese president, and they made a decision that their officials were going to get together and try and solve the trade irritants. He is trying to make some progress. No, you don't see those things as a bit of progress?
What progress? Can you name one tariff line that he's reduced abroad?
No, not at this stage, no.
Not one. No. He said 7 months.
So what would
He's been on 20 trips.
What would you like to see him do then? What do you think is the missing piece here?
Keep his promise.
Yeah, but how? It's easy to say that. It's the how that's difficult.
Well, the how, I said that I would face President Trump and the rest of the world from a position of strength. Right now, we're in a position of weakness. The Americans know we can't sell our goods to anyone else because we don't have pipelines and LNG plants to get our most valuable export to other markets. I would pass the Canadian Sovereignty Act, which would rapidly greenlight and legalize pipelines, LNG plants, and other infrastructure.
But the government is doing some of that. There's an LNG plant that's happening. There are major projects.
Approved by Stephen Harper.
Well, there's an expansion of it. There's an expansion of it. And the Major Projects Office, it does allow them to get around laws and regulations. You know, that's the goal of it.
That's the goal. We're 7 months in, and the clock is ticking. I think we've been through enough goal setting, and now it's time for results achieved, and we're not getting any results. Mr. Carney won't even tell us if he supports an oil pipeline to the Pacific. His energy minister says it's just too hypothetical. What do you mean hypothetical? We had a project that was approved prior to the Liberals taking office. So here we are with no progress on expanding our resources or getting things done. It's all very good that he's setting up these offices and agencies in Ottawa, but I've got news for him. We're not going to make our economy economically independent by setting up new bureaucracies in Ottawa.
The government has openly been courting China, so we'd rather have Canadians be in control of supporting a dictatorship that has actually executed Canadian citizens, a dictatorship that has called for Conservative Party members to be sent to a consulate so that they could likely be executed? What? Okay.
I think at its core, it is about the way we treat each other, interact with each other, what we were saying earlier, this sort of pragmatic engagement. Where can we engage? Where are we not going to engage? Where do we agree? Where can we build? Where do we disagree? And we're not. And being clear about that. And there may be some bumps along the way when there's some ambiguity, but ironing those out as quickly as possible. And then there is, because there are a lot of areas where cooperation makes sense. Look, I'll give you an example. We are two countries that care about climate change and care about global solutions to climate change.
Are we really? That's crazy. If you just want to take a look at ourworldindata.org, it shows quite the opposite. I think the lie detector test has determined that that is a lie. And I think that data, among so many other violations that they have when it comes to human rights and so many other issues, like election interference in Canada, of which that has been documented and proved, actually to pump up Mark Carney and try to convince Canadian citizens who are Chinese to vote for him. And while, of course, the mainstream media in Canada framed all of those events, of which there were two during the Liberal leadership race, one that was targeting Chrystia Freeland, most probably in order to boost Mark Carney. The second one, which was deliberately to boost Mark Carney as, it's an attack, a foreign attack, election interference towards Mark Carney. No, it was all actually to boost him, and they did not report that properly whatsoever, but it does make you wonder why. Why does China care so much about who gets elected? Why doesn't China want a conservative government? Why do they want Mark Carney? Could it be because of him and his relations with China, which he had, honestly, not even that long before the Liberal leadership race? I don't know.
If Canada moves away from the United States, more towards China in terms of a trading relationship, is that good for the United States?
What is good for the United States is getting Canada to start to adhere to their previous agreements and to follow the rule of law and to stop punishing American companies the way they've been.
Here's the part that just makes absolutely no sense unless you start to see the real game here, because Mark Carney and the Liberals are all convinced we must diversify trade away from the United States, even though we don't have any of the infrastructure reports to be able to do that. And, we still have all sorts of caps on all of our sectors because Mark Carney always says, Canada has what the world wants. We sure do. We just don't give it to them. So make that make sense. I digress, but okay, taking it out of your book, a country putting tariffs on Canada equals we are going to abandon you and create all of this propaganda and fearmonger the hell out of you and make our country hate you. Okay, got it. Okay, so if that's your justification, tariffs are. then why pivot to China? Because China also has tariffs, some of them much steeper, much more detrimental to our economy, like canola as an example. They have also even blocked major Canadian exports, including canola, pork, aluminum. On the surface, none of that makes any sense at all, unless, of course, the official justification for abandoning the United States is fake. Because if Canada were genuinely leaving the United States because of 25% tariffs on some sectors, many of which are still protected under USMCA agreements, you would think Canada would move towards countries that don't tariff us, right? But unfortunately, China is not that. They've blocked our canola, they tariffed our aluminum, they've imprisoned Canadians, they have executed Canadians, they've interfered in our elections, they've bullied and intimidated diplomats and Canadian citizens who have fled the regime, and Carney wants a reset. So clearly, tariffs are not the real driver. Well, okay, well, what is?
It might seem like a contradiction. On the one hand, they block homes, then they subsidize homes. They block resources, then subsidize resources. They want to be in the middle of everything. You want to build a home? You can't just get busy swinging hammers. You have to kneel before the altar of Caesar and ask for permission. Do you want to dig a mine? Well, you can't just get your shovel out and start digging. You have to beg the political class to give you permission. If you want to start a business, you can't just get busy and open the door, serve customers and hire workers. No, your first stop has to be a government agency. This makes the government, its bureaucrats, and its politicians ever more powerful and makes the population ever more subservient. We'll make this a country that works for the people who do the work, not a nation of bureaucrats and busybodies, but instead a nation of entrepreneurs and explorers, of artists and adventurers, of workers and warriors.
Oh yeah, ideology. Because China is much closer to Mark Carney's worldview than the U.S. is. By a long shot, actually, because Mark Carney's not a free market capitalist. He's a technocrat. He likes central planning. He likes climate-driven financial controls. He likes state corporate coordination. He likes ESG enforcement. And that model is a lot closer to Beijing than it is to Washington. Isn't it weird to you that both Justin Trudeau and Mark Carney, this is on video, if you don't believe me, I'll find it and I'll include it in my next one, have both spoken about their admiration, to whatever extent the question was asked, to China and how the Chinese government operates. So from a policy engineering perspective, China is a way better operating environment for Carney's philosophy because he doesn't want a democracy that resists or changes. He wants a system that he can manage. And so with the U.S. relationship, that would limit his control. To be close with the United States, we must remain competitive. We must obey market forces. We can't unilaterally impose technocratic controls. Our energy decisions affect U.S. prices and security. Our banks can't deviate from U.S. systems. That makes Mark Carney's top-down control so much harder. So a shift away from the United States means more room to impose top-down governance at home. And he calls that independence. He calls that sovereignty. But it's actually just freedom for him to control the economy and our people.
And so I think of it as saying, okay, now that we know what their intentions are, let's treat them with respect. But let's make sure we win. And so I'll tell you what the derivative of this is going to be, and I'm telling you right now what's going to happen. Because we're going to have to defend the north of this continent, before this end game is over, we will combine the Canadian and the American economy, not through sovereign rights, but access to all the raw materials Canada has. Some kind of economic deal, it won't be any tariffs on it, I can tell you that, so that we can take 5, 6, 7% of GDP and arm the north and tell the Chinese, don't mess with us. That's where we're going, and it's going to happen much faster than you think.
And this benefits China greatly because China does not have any interest at all in making Canada strong. What they want to do, most likely, is to weaken the United States, right? Because China's number 2. They don't want to be number 2. They want to be number 1. And so Carney's approach to this really does benefit Beijing because they gain resource access, they gain a reliable, compliant supplier, they weaken U.S. supply chains, and they reduce the U.S. influence on North America. So Carney keeps saying diversify away from the United States of America, but diversification that creates a dependence on China and also on our own federal government isn't diversification. That is actually just capture. And the U.S. really became so politically inconvenient for this liberal government.
The negotiations with China have been very, very frustrating for President Trump. You know, as an example, they have a huge digital service tax on companies that stream things like Netflix, that if anybody who makes content that you watch when you go home at the end of the day and you flip around to watch a show, that they've got to make a quota in Canada of how many Canadian actors they have. They've got stuff like that littered throughout the economy, and it's gotten worse and worse under these liberal governments. And so President Trump won't stand for it. He's tried to negotiate with the Canadians to get better deals for Americans, and they've been frankly rude and dismissive, and this is how it gets to where we are.
If Mark Carney and the Liberals' goal was truly Canadian prosperity, they would repair U.S. ties, attract investment, reduce taxes on production, accelerate LNG, critical minerals, and all of that development, and to compete with the United States. But instead, they have chosen the route of provoking the U.S., chasing China, burying us in debt, increasing industrial taxation, and blocking development. Every single one of those things perfectly aligns with Chinese interests, resource capturing, U.S. weakening, and global technocrat interests of central control, ESG financing. So yes, if the goal is prosperity, all of this is absolutely insane. It makes no sense at all. I don't care what your feelings make you feel when it comes to Donald Trump and Trump tariffs. Why don't they make you feel the same thing when it comes to 100% tariffs from China on our canola? Make that make sense. Because it's not about tariffs. This isn't about tariffs at all. The goal is realignment. That makes sense.
Coming back to the budget, lowering taxes is great for people who pay taxes, and that's often middle and higher income. Thinking about the kind of people who'd use this food bank, lower income Canadians who may not benefit from lower taxes in a big way, are there some other affordability measures that a conservative government or that Conservatives might advocate now, specifically aimed at the folks who might use this place?
Yes, absolutely. I want to cut the worst, most immoral tax of all, the tax that targets the poorest people the most, and that is the inflation tax. Inflation happens when governments print money and bid up the cost of everything people buy. It is proven beyond any doubt that the poorest people suffer the most as a result of inflation because they do not have assets that insulate them from the rising cost of living. The inflation tax, the liberal inflation tax, takes from the poor and gives to the rich. It takes from the have-nots and gives to the have-yachts. So when the reason why the food bank use has gone up by over 100% during the massive expansion of liberal government spending and deficits is because the inflation that spending has caused has landed on the shoulders of single moms and seniors and others who can't pay their bills. So when we talk about capping liberal deficits, it's not to please accountants who are looking at spreadsheets. It's to stop inflation so that the hardworking, the working poor, the people who get out of bed every day and work hard for not a lot of money will at least preserve the purchasing power of their dollar. Also, let's get rid of the industrial carbon tax, which again, driving up energy costs will drive up the cost of living on the poorest people. We can't allow that. Our working poor in this country cannot afford more expensive energy. If you want to defeat poverty, there's the two best ways to do it is to have strong money that buys affordable food, homes, and fuel, and abundant, affordable energy for all. That's how we're going to make this a poverty-free nation.
All of that makes perfect sense if prosperity is the goal. And what does Mark Carney say? You know, he had that address to students at some university campus where he told them you need to make more sacrifices. Oh, it's going to be hard. Things are going to get hard. That's not very prosperous sounding, is it? Especially when there are tangible things you can do today that would greatly increase your odds of success, that would greatly increase your economic power and viability, but they choose not to do that. They tell you instead that there's suffering and struggling coming your way. but trust them because they're going to make generational investments into probably more subsidies. That's what that sounds like to me. The budget is being released tomorrow, so we will be talking about that a lot. There's been a lot of rhetoric and people out there saying, oh, well, there's going to be a Christmas election. I don't think that's the case. I don't think any party can afford to have an election right now. I don't think Canadians want to have an election right now. And frankly, as a conservative, every day that we don't do what we need to do to get out of this hurts us more and more. And that is very painful to experience. It's very frustrating to see. But ultimately, I don't think that Mark Carney's budget is going to go unpassed tomorrow. And I think that that's very strategic because we can all see the writing on the walls, but there's still a lot of people, predominantly 60 plus. I'm not attacking you. That's according to statistics, who don't see that same writing on the wall, or they just don't care because everything that's happening doesn't affect them. So they can still be a good person by being a liberal and being a liberal because they're a good person, right? It's not any deeper than that. But I do think that in the very near future, you are going to see a lot more hurt. And that will be the prime time for non-confidence votes to go through, for an election to be had. I don't think for 1 second that we are going to have Mark Carney for the next 3+ years. I don't think for 1 second Mark Carney even wants to be prime minister for that long. I don't think that at all. So I am very curious to see how all of that unfolds tomorrow. I will be talking about it in tomorrow's episode. And again, thank you so much for watching today. I had a totally different lineup of topics, and then I just got really into all of this China tariff USA stuff. I'm Jasmine Lane. Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe, like, follow, comment your thoughts down below. Do you think I might be onto something with this whole tariff not actually being an issue thing? I don't know. It seems logical to me, but if I'm wrong, I would love for you to fill in those gaps. I'll talk to you tomorrow. And friendly reminder that I am officially on Substack, where I'm going to be sharing some of my notes from episodes that don't actually end up getting published, as well as a weekly newsletter for you there. So I'll put the link to my Substack. It's just at Jasmine Lane. It's my name. But I'll put the link as the pinned comment in this video as well if you want to go subscribe over there and get some more behind the scenes footage, I guess you could call it. And sorry for being gone for so long. I got hit with a nasty respiratory virus. I'm on the mend though, so I'm hoping that I won't be gone again for a very long time. Fingers crossed. Anyway, I will talk to you very soon. Take care.